It's quite possible that the chaos on the Conservative side of politics will continue for some time. Today, the two alternatives to Sussan Ley, Angus Taylor and Andrew Hastie, met privately in Melbourne prior to attending the memorial service for their former colleague, Katie Allen. The problem is not that they met for a political discussion on the day of a memorial service, as some Labor figures suggested, including to the Prime Minister who weighed in.
I find it astonishing that there are meetings taking place about the leadership of the Liberal Party on a day such as today.
Goodness me, that's a cheap and grubby shot from someone who can't help himself with the low blow. I have to say, politics is what politicians talk about wherever they are, believe me, even at weddings and funerals. It's the meeting, the fact they had a meeting that doesn't seem to have produced any agreement on the best way forward. That's the issue, and that's where the Liberals absolutely need to stem the bleed. And while that stalemate continues, there's no real opposition, is there, to speak of, to hold a bad government and a poor Prime Minister to account. One of those at the meeting, senior frontbencher James Patterson, was on radio this morning saying that he supported the leader and that he didn't anticipate any change.
I can't predict what all of my colleagues may or may not do, but I can say that in my assessment, Sussan continues to enjoy the support of the majority of the party room.
Well, what that says to me is that while Sussan Ley lacks the numbers to survive medium to long term, neither of the potential challengers have got the numbers on their own. And neither, as yet, has agreed or will agree to give the other a clear run. So while they go back and forth, she limps on. Not because anyone thinks she could turn the ship around. She survives only because they can't decide who the next captain will be. Now, out today, spruiking for Andrew Hastie, was West Australian MP Ben Small, who argued for Hastie on the grounds of generational change. Well, I disagree here. What's important is not the age of the leader, but whether he or she can actually lead. Has the leader got policy convictions? Have they got personal and parliamentary authority and the much-needed political skills to unite the party and reform the coalition? Do they have what it takes to develop and get out and sell the policies that Australians want to see on issues like immigration and getting inflation under control? What all this likely means is that the Liberals and the Nationals, the ex-coalition partners, will go into Parliament next Monday as a rabble. And never more have we needed a strong opposition in this country to hold a bad government to account. That's the travesty of what's happening here under Ley's leadership. So what do I think, or what do we all think, will happen next week? Almost certainly, David Littleproud will face a spill attempt, assuming, of course, that his challenger can get that motion seconded. And while it's unlikely to succeed, it will provide the mover, Queensland MP Colin Boyce, with an excuse to defect to One Nation, thus adding to the chaos. He says he won't move to the crossbench, but we'll see. And while Sussan Ley will likely limp on, it won't be because her colleagues think she's viable, as I said. If she survives, it's just that they can't agree who comes next. If Sussan Ley named a new shadow frontbench to replace those departed National Party ones, well, that's just only going to entrench the split and put off the reconciliation that's needed. It'll also mean that dozens of staff will be sacked, adding to the chaos and shambles. But if she goes into the Parliament without filling the dozen or so shadow frontbench roles and with the Nationals sitting apart from the Liberals, an unworthy and incompetent government will spend question time next week mocking the opposition rather than having to justify its own policies and the damage they are doing on energy and the economy in particular. Now, there is no doubt the Albanese government's politically vulnerable if they were facing a competent and united opposition. The government's energy policy is driving up your power bills. They're going to hike up another 24%, say experts, this year alone. And we're sending manufacturing jobs offshore, predominantly to China. The green obsessions of the left are jeopardising the coal and gas exports we absolutely depend on for our prosperity. And the government's victimhood mindset means it can deport neo-Nazis and prosecute right-wing nutjobs, but it can't and it won't deport the hate preachers and those who prosecute the deals of radical Islam. And bad governments don't just happen in Canberra, they hit you where it hurts. Because inflation has spiked. Every homeowner's costs are all but certain to go up next week when the RBA is forced to raise interest rates. Well, it's not my fault, says the Treasurer Jim Chalmers. Yet a key driver of inflation is government spending. And that's gone up from 25 to 27% of GDP under this government, or roughly $50 billion a year. Yesterday, on the front page of the Australian Financial Review, the Shadow Treasurer Ted O'Brien exposed that there's another $57 billion worth of government spending hidden in the accounts that went out in December, right up against, of course, the Bondi massacre. And that means that Chalmers' claims of an eventual surplus won't happen for the next 10 years. Good on Ted O'Brien, because that's the sort of policy grunt that every frontbencher should be doing. It's the sort of hard work that wins voter support. But he's almost alone here, while the rest of the party room run around bitching and moaning amongst themselves, scrapping over the spoils of opposition, rather than opposing a really bad government. Now, I think the next few weeks will determine whether the Liberal Party and the National Party can survive in their current form. Are there still people in the Liberal Party ranks, the parliamentary ranks, whose characters are bigger than their egos and whose dedication to a stronger Australia is there rather than just chasing the next promotion? If they can't unite around a leader with a clear policy to deal with the energy train wreck, runaway record migration, the housing crisis, and the official disdain we're starting to have in this country for our national symbols, then it won't just be the Liberal Party that suffers, it will be our country. Does the current crop of Liberal MPs have the conviction, the courage, and perhaps most of all, the character to lead? For our country's sake, I hope so.